When a smug HOA president parks in a man's private garage without permission, she thinks she's untouchable, until he demolishes everything, including her luxury SUV. Let the war begin. Lucas Williams had always valued his independence. After 2 decades working as an aerospace engineer, he had finally left behind the corporate grind and moved into the house he had inherited from his late uncle. Nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Colorado, the property was a perfect sanctuary. Spacious, well-kept, and most importantly, free from interference. At least that's what he had thought. That peaceful illusion shattered one crisp Monday morning. Lucas had just finished his coffee and was heading out to run errands when he noticed something strange. His garage door, usually secured with his own lock, was slightly ajar. His brow furrowed as he stepped closer. The handle wouldn't budge. Locked. But he hadn't locked it. He tried again, pulling harder, still no movement. Then he glanced through the small garage window, and his stomach tightened. Inside, parked as if it owned the place, was a black Audi Q7. Lucas blinked, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Who the hell had parked in his garage? And more importantly, how? He had the only key. He stepped back, scanning the driveway for any clues, when the sound of heels clicking against the pavement caught his attention. Striding up the walkway, as if she were royalty arriving at her estate, was Karen Mitchell, the self-proclaimed queen of the Homeowners Association. Mid-50s, immaculately groomed, her blonde bob perfectly styled into place. She exuded an air of absolute control. A smug smile tugged at the corner of her lips as she approached, flanked by 2 HOA board members who looked more like hired muscle than suburban volunteers. "Ah, Lucas! Wonderful timing!" she chirped, stopping in front of him. "I was just about to explain. We've made a small adjustment to community logistics." Lucas folded his arms, his expression cold. "A small adjustment?" His voice was calm, but the tension in his jaw was evident. "There's a stranger's car in my garage. That doesn't seem small." Karen let out a soft chuckle, as if he had made an amusing but naive observation. "Not a stranger's car. My car. I needed a safe and convenient parking spot, and since your garage wasn't being used, it only made sense. For the good of the community, of course." Lucas felt his pulse quicken. He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay composed. "I don't think so. That's my private property, and I never agreed to this." Karen's smile didn't falter. If anything, it widened. "Oh, Lucas, darling, you don't need to agree. The HOA board voted on it. We've designated your garage as a shared community asset. It was an oversight that you weren't notified beforehand, but no harm done, right?" Lucas clenched his fists at his sides. His garage, had been claimed without his consent? The sheer audacity of it almost made him laugh. Almost. "You don't have the authority to do that," he stated flatly. Karen sighed, shaking her head as if he were a difficult child. "Oh, Lucas, you're still thinking like an outsider. The HOA has decided that your property is better suited as part of our community plan. Since you live here, you're naturally expected to contribute." His grip on his temper was slipping. "Let me be clear. I'm not a member of the HOA. My house was never under its jurisdiction, and even if it were, you can't just steal my garage." Karen waved a dismissive hand. Details, you are now. We recently voted to extend HOA governance to all homes in the area. So, welcome to the HOA. You'll be receiving your first membership bill soon." Lucas stared at her, his mind caught between disbelief and fury. They had unilaterally decided that his house now belonged to their little suburban empire. As if they could just redraw property lines at will. His voice came out colder than before. "You have 24 hours to move your car, Karen. After that, I call the police." Her expression barely shifted, but there was a glint of amusement in her eyes. "Oh, Lucas," she sighed. "You'll see soon enough. You don't get to call the shots anymore." With that, she turned on her heel and strode away, her guards following closely behind. Lucas stood frozen for a moment, anger simmering just beneath the surface. This wasn't just HOA overreach. This was a blatant invasion. One thing was certain. This was war. Lucas didn't waste time. That very afternoon, he called the police to report unauthorized access to his property. When the officers arrived, Karen was already waiting outside. Her arms crossed, lips curled into an infuriating smirk. "Oh, officers, I'm so glad you're here," she said sweetly before Lucas could even speak. "We have a rather unfortunate situation. Mr. Williams is refusing to comply with community regulations, and I fear he may be causing a disturbance." Lucas let out a slow breath through his nose. "She illegally parked her car in my garage and locked me out of my own property," Karen gasped in theatrical shock. "Locked out? Oh, Lucas, let's not exaggerate. Your garage door is perfectly accessible. To the community, of course. You just seem to be confused about the new rules." The officer, a middle-aged man who had clearly dealt with suburban nonsense before, pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, do you have legal ownership of this garage?" Karen's smile barely wavered. "The HOA has jurisdiction over community spaces, and we've recently expanded to include Lucas's property." "No," Lucas interrupted, his patience razor thin. "You don't." The officer turned to Lucas. "Do you have proof of ownership?" Wordlessly, Lucas handed over his deed, which clearly stated that his property was not part of the HOA's jurisdiction. The officer scanned it, nodded, and turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, you are trespassing on private property. You need to remove your vehicle immediately." Karen's jaw tightened, her facade cracking just a little. "Well," she said stiffly, "I suppose I can make an exception just this once." The car was gone by evening. But Lucas wasn't naive enough to think this was over. By the next morning, a HOA violation notice was taped to his front door. Then another, and another. "Your front yard landscaping does not meet aesthetic guidelines. 200 fine. Garbage bins must be placed at the curb by 6 a.m., not 6:15 a.m. 50 fine. Your mailbox is an unapproved color. 300 fine." Lucas tossed them all straight into the trash. But the harassment escalated. One evening, his power mysteriously went out. Only his house, nowhere else on the street. The electric company found no issues with the wiring, just unexplained interference. Later that week, a tow truck arrived, claiming they had orders to impound his car for abandoned vehicle violations. Lucas barely stopped them in time, proving that his registration was perfectly valid. Then came the final insult. A bright orange notice, nailed to his front door. Notice of HOA property seizure. They were declaring his garage a shared community asset again, this time permanently. Lucas stared at the paper, his fingers tightening around it. His blood boiled. They wanted war? Fine. He'd give them one. Lucas stood on his porch, gripping the HOA property seizure notice so tightly that the paper crumpled in his fists. His jaw was clenched, his heartbeat thunderous. He had expected Karen to double down, but this was beyond audacity. This was pure, unfiltered arrogance. His garage, his private property, had now been officially declared a shared community asset? Who the hell did these people think they were? And then, as if the universe itself wanted to taunt him further, Karen appeared once again. She strolled down the sidewalk toward his house, her expression dripping with condescension. Arms crossed, head held high, like a monarch surveying her kingdom. A kingdom she thought included Lucas's garage. "Oh, Lucas," she cooed, stopping just before his steps. "I know this is a lot for you to process, but I assure you, it's for the best. We simply can't have unutilized space in our neighborhood. The board has officially approved the decision." Lucas inhaled slowly through his nose, trying to suppress the sheer rage bubbling up in his chest. She was acting like she had already won. Karen gave him a mockingly sympathetic smile, placing a hand over her chest as if she actually felt bad. "I know change is hard, but you'll adjust. And don't worry. We'll make sure to take good care of it." Lucas exhaled sharply. That was it. The moment the final switch flipped in his brain. If the HOA wanted his garage so badly, then they could have it, piece by piece. That night, Lucas sat in his home office, staring at the blueprint of his property. His eyes flicked to the garage, the so-called community asset they were trying to steal. Number better. He'd destroy it, then let them take control. If it wasn't there, they had nothing to claim. A slow smirk crept onto his face as a beautiful, ruthless idea took shape. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number. The next morning, at the crack of dawn, a construction crew rolled into his driveway. The morning air was crisp, the sun barely cresting over the rooftops as the rumble of heavy machinery filled the quiet suburban street. A demolition crew had arrived, their neon vests bright against the dull pavement. A bulldozer, a wrecking crane, and a team of men ready to tear down what used to be Lucas's garage. Lucas stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching as the foreman approached with clipboard in hand. "All right, Mr. Williams," the man said, flipping through the documents. "Everything's in order. You sure you want to do this? This garage looks pretty sturdy." Lucas smirked, eyes glinting with cold amusement. "Oh, I'm sure. Consider this a preventative measure." He didn't have to wait long for the fireworks to begin. A shrill, outraged scream ripped through the morning air. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Karen. She came storming down the sidewalk in a fury unlike anything Lucas had seen before, her robe flapping behind her, hair in disarray, as if she had sprinted straight from bed. Behind her, a few curious neighbors peeked out from their porches, drawn by the commotion. Lucas barely suppressed a laugh. Oh, this was going to be good. The foreman looked from Karen to Lucas, confused. Who is this?" Lucas, grinning ear to ear, made a lazy gesture toward her. "Oh, that's the woman who thought my garage was hers." Karen practically screeched, pointing a trembling finger at the bulldozer. "Stop this right now! This is HOA property! You can't do this!" Lucas raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "Oh? I was under the impression that you were taking my garage. So, I figured, why not get ahead of things?" Karen's face twisted in disbelief, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. She turned to the foreman. "You! I am ordering you to stop this! This structure belongs to the community!" The foreman blinked. "No, ma'am. This structure belongs to Lucas Williams. He hired us. We have the permits. It's coming down." Karen let out an inhuman noise, her voice cracking as she turned back to Lucas, eyes wild with rage and desperation. "You think this is funny? You think you can just destroy community property because you're a petty little man?" Lucas chuckled. "Oh, I'm having a blast." And then the first crash. The wrecking crane swung hard, smashing into the side of the garage. Wood splintered, metal groaned, debris scattered. The garage shuddered, the force sending tremors through the ground. Karen screamed like her soul had just left her body. And then it happened. The moment Lucas had been waiting for. From beneath the collapsing structure, there was a sickening crunch. Karen froze. Her head snapped toward the sound, her eyes widening in horror. "No!" she shrieked, lunging forward as if she could somehow stop the inevitable. But it was too late. The garage caved in completely, and with it, her beloved black Audi Q7. Karen collapsed onto her knees, hands clutching her hair, sobbing in sheer devastation. "My car! My beautiful car!" Lucas let out a low, satisfied whistle, watching as the last of the garage crumbled into a heap of twisted metal and shattered wood. He turned back to Karen, who was still rocking back and forth, whispering brokenly about insurance deductibles. With mock sympathy, he crouched down beside her. "Damn, Karen. Maybe next time don't park in someone else's garage." Karen's head snapped up, eyes burning with pure hatred. "I'll ruin you for this," she spat. "I'm calling the police! I'm calling the HOA lawyers! You're finished!" Lucas stood up, dusting off his hands. "Go ahead," he said, completely unfazed. "Let's see how well that works out for you." Karen's face twisted in fury as she fumbled for her phone. But the neighbors were watching now, whispering, laughing behind their hands. The HOA's untouchable queen had just been publicly humiliated. And Lucas? He just walked back to his porch, watching as the HOA's empire crumbled with every piece of debris that hit the ground. The courtroom was packed. HOA board members, nosy neighbors, and even local reporters had gathered to witness what had quickly become the most talked-about case in the county. Lucas sat at the defendant's table, calm and collected, his lawyer, Daniel Carter, flipping through a thick stack of legal documents. Across from him, Karen sat stiffly, her perfectly styled bob slightly disheveled, a first for her. Even under her layers of foundation, a deep red blotch had formed on her neck, creeping up toward her face. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, entered the courtroom and took her seat. She adjusted her glasses and glanced at the case files. "All right," she said, tapping her gavel once. "We are here today regarding case number 2305, Karen Mitchell versus Lucas Williams. The plaintiff alleges destruction of personal property, harassment, and violation of HOA policies. The defendant countersues for unlawful trespassing, property seizure attempts, and emotional distress. Mr. Carter, you may begin." Lucas's lawyer stood confidently, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, we will demonstrate that this case is not about a man unlawfully destroying a garage, but about an HOA president who grossly abused her authority in an attempt to seize property that was never under her jurisdiction." He turned toward Karen with a sharp smile. "Furthermore, we will prove that the plaintiff committed multiple acts of fraud, intimidation, and illegal tampering to manipulate both the defendant and the surrounding community." Karen scoffed, rolling her eyes. "This is ridiculous." The judge shot her a glare. "You'll have your turn, Mrs. Mitchell," Daniel continued. "First, let's address the most obvious fact. The garage belonged to Mr. Williams. Here is a certified deed to the property, proving that his house and garage were never part of the HOA. He handed the papers to the court clerk, who passed them to the judge. The judge examined the documents, nodding slowly. "Interesting. Mrs. Mitchell, would you care to explain why you attempted to claim ownership of something that legally belonged to Mr. Williams?" Karen leaned forward, her voice dripping with false confidence. "Your Honor, the HOA has authority over all properties within our designated boundary. We made the decision to expand our jurisdiction in a recent vote, which naturally included Mr. Williams' home." Lucas's lawyer smirked. "Ah, yes. The vote. You mean the one that included 0 homeowner signatures, no legal documentation, and was passed solely by the HOA board without municipal approval? Karen's jaw clenched. The board has the right to make decisions for the betterment of the community. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Even if those decisions involve trespassing onto private property, changing the locks on someone's garage, and attempting to tow their car. Karen's face paled slightly. I don't recall anything about towing. Daniel pulled up a video on a screen for the entire courtroom to see. Footage from Lucas's security cameras played, showing an HOA representative speaking with a tow truck driver in front of Lucas's house, pointing at his parked vehicle. The driver looked hesitant, clearly asking for paperwork, but the HOA member waved him off, insisting it was an abandoned car violating the rules. Karen's breath hitched. Daniel let the video play a little longer, revealing Karen herself, walking onto the scene, barking orders at the HOA member and gesturing wildly toward Lucas's house. The judge's gaze hardened. Mrs. Mitchell, this looks very much like an attempt to illegally remove Mr. Williams' vehicle. Karen stammered, her confidence visibly cracking. That was a misunderstanding. We had complaints about the vehicle being left unattended for weeks. Lucas leaned forward, his voice cool. Weeks? Funny. That footage is from the same day I parked it. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The lawyer wasn't done. Now, let's discuss the unlawful fines the HOA issued to Mr. Williams. A new document was displayed. A list of absurd HOA violations Lucas had received, including mailbox does not match community standard color, $300 fine, failure to maintain shrubbery to regulation height, $500 fine, unauthorized structure, garage, must be reassigned for community use. No fine, just a notice of seizure. Daniel walked toward the jury, shaking his head. These notices were delivered despite Mr. Williams never having signed an HOA contract. They were designed purely to harass him into submission. Karen clenched her fists, her breathing shallow. Then came the final blow. Daniel pulled up a final piece of footage. Karen screaming at the demolition crew, demanding they stop the destruction of her garage, only for them to tell her that the job was fully legal and approved. And then the moment where the wrecking ball crushed her car. Karen let out an audible whimper. The courtroom sat in tense silence, eyes bouncing between the video, Karen, and Lucas. The judge exhaled heavily, rubbing her temples before adjusting her glasses. Mrs. Mitchell, she began, her voice laced with restrained irritation. You have falsely attempted to seize property, issued baseless fines, engaged in intimidation tactics, and manipulated the homeowners in your community. You knowingly misrepresented your authority and caused deliberate harm. She tapped her gavel against the desk. I am ruling in favor of Mr. Williams. Karen shot up from her seat, eyes blazing with fury. What? No, he destroyed my car! He destroyed community property! He's a menace! The judge barely looked up. Mrs. Mitchell, sit down before I hold you in contempt. Karen gripped the table so hard her knuckles turned white, but she obeyed, dropping into her chair, seething. The judge continued, voice firm and final. Mr. Williams is awarded $250,000 in damages for emotional distress, harassment, and unlawful property interference. Karen gasped like a fish out of water. $250,000? The judge narrowed her eyes. Yes, and furthermore, I am ordering an immediate audit of the HOA's financial and legal practices. Given the evidence presented today, it is likely this board will be facing serious legal repercussions. Karen looked like she had been physically struck. Her mouth trembled, Her breaths came in short, shallow gasps. And then, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed onto the table. The courtroom erupted into whispers as people craned their necks to see if she had really passed out from sheer humiliation. Lucas sat back in his chair, arms folded, a satisfied smirk tugging at his lips. Justice had been served. The fallout from the court ruling was swift and merciless. Within 48 hours, the entire neighborhood was buzzing with shock, gossip, and outrage. But not at Lucas. No, Karen Mitchell had become the most despised person in the community. Her downfall was spectacular. The HOA, once a tyrannical force that ruled over the neighborhood with an iron grip, imploded overnight. Following the judge's decision to audit the HOA's finances and legal practices, the first cracks in their power structure became evident. It turned out that Karen and her closest board members had been skimming money from HOA fees for years, using community funds for personal expenses, luxury vacations, home renovations, even leasing a second car for Karen's husband. As the audit results went public, panic spread like wildfire. Homeowners who had blindly trusted Karen were now furious. They had been forced to pay for mandatory upgrades, fake violations, and excessive landscaping fees, all under the guise of neighborhood beautification. Under immense pressure, the entire HOA board resigned within a week, several of them facing pending lawsuits for fraud and financial misconduct. The HOA itself was now under investigation by the state. For the first time in over a decade, the community was free from Karen's rule, and they made sure she knew it. If Karen thought she could escape the consequences, she was dead wrong. The $250,000 in damages the court had ordered her to pay was a financial death blow. She had no way of covering that amount, not with her house already mortgaged to the max and her savings drained from years of lavish spending. Desperate, she tried to appeal the court decision, only for the judge to reject her appeal within minutes. When the bank moved to repossess her house, Karen completely broke down. Neighbors reported hearing her screaming in frustration, slamming doors, and even throwing an entire flower pot at a reporter who had come to cover the story. Then came the final humiliation. Karen had spent years terrorizing her neighbors, issuing fines, threatening lawsuits, forcing people to repaint their homes just to match her absurd aesthetic standards. But now, she was the outsider. People openly mocked her. Where once residents had feared her clipboard and endless rulebook, they now openly laughed whenever she walked by. Children whispered about the Wicked Witch of the HOA, and some particularly petty homeowners put up signs in their yards that read, "Finally, ho free!" Karen couldn't take it. A month after the court ruling, she was gone. Her house was put on the market at a desperate discount, and when the moving truck arrived, neighbors stood on their porches, watching in silent satisfaction. Someone even played "Hit the Road, Jack" on a loudspeaker as she drove away. As for Lucas, he became something of a neighborhood hero. People who had once avoided him, too afraid of angering Karen, now went out of their way to shake his hand. The local diner even named a burger after him, the Garage Crusher Special. Lucas, for the most part, just enjoyed the peace and quiet. No more fake fines, no more threats. No more HOA nonsense. And as he sat on his porch, sipping a beer, watching the sunset over his newly rebuilt HOA-free garage, he smiled. Karen had thought she could take his property. Instead, she lost everything. A month had passed since Karen's spectacular downfall, and the neighborhood had never been more peaceful. Without her iron grip, people were finally free to live their lives, paint their houses whatever color they wanted, park wherever they pleased, and, most importantly, exist without constant harassment. Lucas had just finished grilling a steak in his backyard when his phone buzzed. A message from his neighbor, Mark. Dude, you need to see this. Check out the old HOA lot. Curious, Lucas grabbed his keys and walked down the block. As he approached the former HOA office, he slowed to a stop, a slow, satisfied grin forming on his face. The building, once the command center of Karen's reign of terror, was now a bakery, a giant banner stretched across the front. Now open Karen-free cookies and coffee. Lucas burst out laughing. It was perfect. Just then, a familiar figure appeared on the sidewalk. Karen. Only now, she wasn't the untouchable queen of the HOA. She looked tired, bitter, her once perfectly styled hair now in a messy ponytail. A for rent sign hung from the window of the tiny apartment she had been forced to move into cross town. Their eyes met. For a moment, Lucas thought she might say something, maybe even apologize, but instead, she turned away, shoulders hunched, disappearing down the street. Lucas exhaled, shaking his head. Karen had spent years trying to control everything, and in the end, she had nothing. With a smirk, he pushed open the bakery door. "Hey," he called to the barista. "I'll take a Karen-free coffee. Extra sweet."